episode 165, discussing diet with a chef and osteopath. I'm your host, Dr. Justin Trosclair, and today we're Dr. Colin Zhu's perspective.
Join 2017 and 18 Podcast Awards nominated host and best-selling author on Amazon as we get a behind-the-curtain look at all types of doctor and guest specialties. Let's hear a doctor's perspective.
Thanks for tuning in again. We just came back from a Berlin trip before the shutdown, second wave. Beautiful city, lots of great buildings. The food was nice, the traffic was terrible. And driving a stick in hour-long traffic, I don't know why you would do it. I just don't know. Before we jump in today, if you're looking for the list of all the books that all these great guests have recommended, you can go to doctorsperspective.net/book list. And today's guest definitely dropped about 6 different authors, so there's at least 12 books referenced today, including his own. Again, if you are looking for a way to get more podcast interviews for yourself, to have medical doctors and osteopaths call you back to have a conversation about why they should refer to you, go to doctorsperspective.net/one-sheet. You can see happy recipients, testimonials, as well as the samples. So go check that out, and I appreciate it. Now, Dr. Colin today is a chef and an osteopath, and we're going to discuss how he combines the two, how it happened, of course, the origin story, and thriving. That's a big word that he likes to use, and we'll find out why that is. And we'll discuss plant-based nutrition. If you don't know a lot about it, you'll learn more, and how he uses nutrition to educate not only patients, but actually other doctors on how they can get better results with high blood pressure, cholesterol, diabetes, and things like that. So great episodes coming your way. All the show notes and the transcript can be found at doctorsperspective.net/165. Let's go hashtag behind the curtain.
Live from Germany and California, today on the show, we've got a doctor of osteopath, and he's converted himself over to more of the chef field. He's got National Gourmet Institute and Institute for Integrative Nutrition degrees as well, and we just really want to pick the chef doc's mind. He's got a podcast called Thrive Bites since early 2019. He's getting some good downloads. He's excited about it. I'm excited about it. So please welcome Dr. Colin Zhu.
Well, thank you, Justin, Dr. Justin, for having me on your show, and I'm happy to be here to chat with you.
Everybody got to know. One, you still look young. I mean, you're not only so young, because you're a doctor of osteopath, that takes forever. Mm-hmm. So what made you go that route? And then how did you switch over to the chef thing? And I guess we'll go into it, but, how do you blend those two? Because I'm assuming you didn't have to go to osteopath school to become a chef. So
Of course.
How'd that play out?
Yeah. So I'm an American. Obviously, you have international, audiences. So I'm an American, born and raised in New Jersey, born to immigrant parents. I'm based in Los Angeles right now. It's hard for me to kind of tell you, where I'm at now without telling you a little bit of where I came from. And so, I was born to a Chinese mother. I'm Chinese in descent. And my mother is a Chinese medical doctor, very befitting because you do acupuncture and, all this other stuff too. So she has been practicing traditional Chinese medicine, acupuncture, herbs for, I would say 4 decades now, close to 4 decades. And she's a master of what she does. Pretty much growing up, I worked in her office in and out over the years, and she really taught me really how to look at a person, a patient, from a holistic approach. From that, years of indirect education, I learned about compassion, empathy, and just looking at things from a holistic point of view. And so I really wanted to, actually, quite funny, because I actually wanted to start off being a chiropractor. We actually, I'm not allowed to, I don't talk about this on my podcast, but at first I wanted to be a chiropractor because we actually had a failing chiropractor that was an awesome individual, and he was Jewish, and he was just a loving, fun-loving guy. Most chiropractors I meet are really fun-loving people. and they really love what they do and they really want the best for their patients. And so I went into medicine wanting to marry East and West, when I decided to go into medicine. And when I got into medical school, I'm sure you probably heard this with other people on your show or your colleagues, but we didn't really receive. What I found out was, we learned a lot about disease, how it, pathophysiology, pharmacology, drugs, things like that. But we didn't really learn much about, nutrition or lifestyle type of education or curricula.
Right.
And so, when you follow these doctors, I shout out a lot of doctors, mostly primary care physicians, really, really good at what they do, really caring individuals. You realize that a lot of patients, what they suffer from is what we face on a day-to-day basis, obesity, diabetes, etc. When I found out that there was a lack of it, I decided upon myself to seek more education. And so after I graduated medical school, before I matriculated into residency, graduated off cycle because I stayed back to become a teaching assistant. I graduated off cycle, so I had like 9 months to play with. And so I didn't want to learn just about nutrition. I wanted to learn more about food and where it came from and, how to source it, how it benefited, our overall health. And so I enrolled myself into culinary school, and not just any culinary school. It was more of like a health supportive, plant-based, culinary school. And then when I went into residency, when I did family practice, I blended the two. So that's how I got onto the road.
Wow. That's wild. I actually tell people they should probably just go be DOs if they're thinking about chiropractic. I was like, maybe try to just be a DO, and then you can actually have way more like access, and then you can just learn the chiropractic and nutrition stuff on the side or afterwards.
Yeah.
Just like we have to learn more of the rehab stuff to be the best rehab chiropractor based as well. But
yeah.
So do you actually practice medicine right now, or do you kind of full-time try to, podcast and YouTube and, that kind of like digital lifestyle?
I do it all. So going back to your, the first point, I actually just applied to DO. Once I understood osteopathy, I was like, wow, how come everyone doesn't know about this?
Exactly. I didn't even know about it.
Yeah, that was junior year of my university. That was my third year. And once I went into it, I only applied to osteopathic schools. For those in the audience that doesn't know, I'm sure you guys have explained, but just as a friendly reminder, osteopathy is basically the same thing as a medical doctor, as an MD in the United States. And we practice, we prescribe, we do surgery and license in all 50 states. I know a DO is different internationally, and we are seen as more as like a chiropractor or a bone setter is the original terms. But we're exactly the same as a medical doctor in the United States. Yeah, I would encourage everyone, if you're in school, to kind of look more into it. But to answer your question, what I did with my culinary degree was I took a different path. Most people went into restaurant work, hospitality, things like that, catering. I decided, specifically to enhance my family practice type of style. So I mainly worked in outpatient clinics because I really enjoyed the rapport with, physician and counseling a patient and coaching them. And so I only worked, outside outpatient clinics, and that's what I did. So how I use it was, I would go more in depth in terms of lifestyle, counseling. And then outside of it, sometimes I would get hired or asked or invited to speak at conferences, podcasts like this, write for other publications. I would do speaking engagements, workshops, demonstrations, and I would just do like food demos and talk about how food as medicine could be used as a tool to be able to better our health. My main audience wasn't really targeted, but it just happened to be like this. But my main audience is actually healthcare professionals, specifically for primary care. And so I think it sets up nicely because it helps teach the teacher. And so it can create a ripple effect and they can go back to their communities and teach others. And the whole point of all this, honestly, my whole sole purpose is really to teach, inspire, and empower others so they could, help others. That's really the main goal of it. So over the years, I started an online platform called The Chef Doc 3 years ago. A little bit more than 3 years ago now. I wrote a book, and then, I started a podcast last year. So
that's true. I was meant to write that down, that he wrote the book. It's called The Thrive Doctor?
Thrive Medicine.
Thrive Medicine. I was close.
Yeah. Yeah.
So do you find that patients are even receptive to, as a chiropractor, of course, we're much more likely to talk about, oh, you got restless leg. Maybe you should, take some B9 or maybe eat some more broccoli or something.
Mm-hmm.
Are you finding that patients are receptive to this type of thing? Or do you have potentially like cooking workshops for like diabetics or anything? Or
So most of my stuff is online. So after I graduated, I've been doing mostly traditional medicine, right?
Okay.
So, and then what I would do is I'll blend it. I don't have my own practice per se. And then the chef doc is kind of like a passion that's outside of, medicine. And sometimes it blends, sometimes it doesn't blend. I typically work for other clients and employers. So what ends up happening is that people will find me online or via social media and go to, my website for resources. And that's where I have like articles and, other resources, things like that, and then when I talk to patients, I would refer them to different things that I trust, because, nowadays we're inundated with a lot of health misinformation. And so I do my best to be able to kind of scour and find trusted resources for them so they can further educate themselves because, education is, power. So the more you're educated, the better choices you can, make for your own lives. So
what are you finding to say the top 2 or 3 either articles or podcast episodes that you've released? Like what kind of topics are hitting your top charts?
My podcast is focused on 3 things. It's plant-based lifestyle. Second is enhancing emotional resilience. And then third is about thriving, So I source out guests that, in general are very just passionate, people. And, so for me, I thrive in my own life. And so I know that I can bring that energy, but when you have 2 people in the room that can, both bring that energy, it's kind of like a dance, it will, my perspective is that it will help, the podcast, a lot. I usually talk to doctors, dietitians, chefs, coaches, and then other people that are, entrepreneurial, that are just, very, very passionate. So they just kind of bring that. But my top episodes to answer your question are ones that talk about plant-based lifestyles. I talk about a lot with experts that talk about using lifestyle and using evidence-based approaches relating in the lifestyle medicine field to be able to enhance our health, especially during the pandemic. I actually came out with a 10-episode COVID series just talking about enhancing wellness when this all happened. So
for those who are just like, I'm not into this plant-based nutrition and plants can heal things, what is that, or what would that look like?
Yeah. So basically, obviously in the field of nutrition, it's a very evolving and ever-changing science. There's always a new article or new, news segment about it. But, when I talk about plant-based, I talk about whole foods, plant-based living. When you look at the research, it's the only diet, a plant-based, diet is the only diet that's been proven to reverse heart disease, diabetes, and early stages of prostate cancer. And this type of literature has been dating back since like 1990 in, publications like The Lancet, and very prominent news publications, medical journals. And the reason why most people don't hear about this is one, we're not taught this in school, going back to my first point. And then number 2 is that big companies and corporations don't profit off of this. So it's the type of things that you're not going to see headlines for. You will see a cholesterol lowering medication, or you will see the next weight loss fad, then seeing like big broccoli, trying to,
big lotus.
Yeah, exactly.
Some bok choy benefits.
Yeah, exactly. So you're not going to see that, but the science is sound and the science is there, and there's mountain loads of this. You know what I'm saying? So it's just bringing it up to awareness in things like this, a podcast, a book, conferences. But yeah, the literature has been there. For me, it's not rocket science for people to say, eat better, eat your vegetables and fruits and things like that. So for me, it's like, I don't subscribe people to, a specific diet. I just tell them to eat more plants.
It's about cooking it too. We know we need to eat vegetables. It's just nobody wants to eat them because they taste like garbage unless you know how to cook them.
It really comes down to whether, you know how to prepare it. You know what I'm saying? In terms of an American diet, we're not that well versed. But when you have influences of, other cultures, we just prepare it better. Indians, prepare it better. Southeast Asia prepare it better. The Chinese prepare it better. You know what I'm saying? So you
Straight
just kind of
up.
have to find, other ways to do it. So it's not impossible. So.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, my wife is Chinese, and so that's pretty much what we eat nowadays. And it's always just so good. My kid eats it. She's 2 years old. She eats all the vegetables that we can cook, from lotus to black edible fungus and all kinds of stuff
Yep.
that people are like, wait, what is all these things you're saying
Yeah.
at the moment? But it's all like the spices. And I saw on the site that you have, recipes and different things like that.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's really good to hear about the target audience, if you will, and the goals behind what you're doing. Because, yeah, I mean, we eat too much meat, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I still do, but we still do. And I really like Dr. Walter Longo's. He has the longevity diet
Yeah.
and
Mm-hmm.
all that, the Prolone. And
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I really subscribe to that. And in theory, it's just harder to implement.
Yeah, there's a lot
But
of sciences and benefits with like intermittent fasting that are coming out that shows, really good stuff. But yeah, I mean, for your audiences, if they're curious, I would say look up, the names of Dr. Dean Ornish, Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn, T. Colin Campbell, Michael Greger. These guys have sound research. So, don't take my word for it.
and what's nice is you get to actually, because you have the degree, it
Mm-hmm.
brings more credibility to what you're recommending.
Mm-hmm.
Where if it's just somebody off the street, it could become like, oh, that's just woo-woo
Yeah.
type of weird stuff. And you're like, well,
Yeah.
actually, it's not. Like, I know what I'm talking about. I do not know how to read research and things. I think you may have already answered this question, but when you're doing marketing or trying to get the word out for the Chef Doc and Thrive Medicine, the book, anything that you're doing that's really working well?
So social media has always been, helpful, for me. So I've been, I use Facebook and Instagram since the beginning. I'm not an expert or influencer, quote unquote, status, but it's really just leveraging social media because of, its inherent network. And for better or worse, social media, you can argue that, making us dumb, making us numb, and, making us zombies, But if you use it as a tool, as opposed to allowing social media to use you, then you could use it for, beneficial business and marketing strategies. So I use social media. So I'm active on Facebook, Instagram. I use LinkedIn a lot. That's how you found me.
Mm-hmm.
And then I have my own website, which, if you think of it as you don't have a website, it's kind of like, it's like the modern day business card, and you could, go from there. And then, the book I thought was a very good way to kind of reach more people than I can with my four walls. And then the same thing with the podcast. Podcast is a relatively newer medium compared to like movies, TVs, and radio, but it's evolving exponentially. I think it's a great way to be able to engage with audiences. So
What can we expect in the book? What will we find there? A bunch of recipes, hardcore science?
So the reason why I titled the book Thrive Medicine is because in my own life, I was able to do a lot personally and do a lot professionally. And so the book is kind of like half memoir, half like self-empowerment. And so I went on this, self-work, going inward, to yourself and, trying to learn more about my life and, things like that for a greater part of a decade right now. It chronicles like, different things I've learned along the way. And so I've learned a lot of tools that I wanted to teach others. So in the book, you'll get a lot of personal anecdotes, but you also get a lot of, tips and words of wisdom, from myself, from my own experiences. I cite articles and things like that. And then there's like action steps. There's like call to action, and then there's notes for you to jot on. So the book is really about how to take your life, and elevating it to a higher, purpose, a new level for yourself if you want to, do that, because what I found, observing people in general is that we go through something called the default life is what I term it. And it's kind of like, you're born, go through school, society, parents, religion, they all have their ways of, teaching to someone. They tell you to go to get a job, go to school, get a job, get married, have kids, and then you work until you die pretty much. And so I felt like most humans kind of follow this pattern, but, I felt like, if we could take some detours or we do something different, we might find that, we can enhance our lives differently. And not to say that that route is bad. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying that, why don't we entertain different things or different pathways for ourselves to, get more out of life?
Okay. Based on everything that you've done and the experience with your patients and everything, are there any actual foods, not just generic vegetables, real food items for diabetes or high cholesterol that you're like, this is something that I recommend to people because of it's such high quality?
There is, I mean, I could go in the route of saying like specific foods, but I think I would do more of a disservice to people if I don't recommend, the reasonings behind, why a plant-based lifestyle is good. So, when you look at, these chronic diseases, they all have like a very similar basis of chronic inflammation, right? And so when you study, how what animal-based foods like, meat, eggs, dairy, cheese, and what that does to our body, and then you compare that to how plants, and when we say plant-based, we mean vegetables in all its varieties, fruits in all its varieties, whole grains, beans, legumes, nuts, seeds, whole grains, things like that. That's what we mean by plant-based. And you compare that and you look at the science, is that what plants does is that it lowers your body's inflammation. When you lowers your body's inflammation, it lowers the likelihood of you getting heart disease and cancer and strokes and diabetes. So in essence, eating more plants will help you be able to combat all these different things. So it's better to say that in that way, because that's actually what it does. I'm not trying to manipulate. I'm not trying to manipulate, the wording, but that's what it does. And we need to steer away from how we prescribe things like how modern medicine does, like a pill for every ill. And how Mother Nature does it is that it's not like that. It takes care of your entire body. You just got to look at the research. There's just so much,
Do you feel that, obviously I think you're saying white flour, white rice is probably stuff that probably just need to not be eating as much, stick to the other types of wild rice and whole wheats and things?
Yeah. Yeah, so I would say in general, when you're eating animal-based foods, not only is it promoting more inflammation in your body, but you're also, depending on how it's prepared. According to the World Health Organization, we classify red meat, for example, as a class 2 carcinogen, right? And processed meats like cured meats like bacon, sandwich meats, deli meats, things like that, anything that's preserved or manipulated in a way, processed meats, that's a class 1 carcinogen. Do you know what is in the same class as a class 1 carcinogen?
I'm going to go with cigarettes.
Yep. Tobacco, cigarettes and asbestos. You know what I'm saying? So,
classy.
Yeah. And so not a lot of people know that, right? And so we know that, over time, over the decades, we know that it's bad for us. But, food is the new cigarettes. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
If you look at the work by Dr. Neil Barnard, he says, if you could eat better, eating better is like the nutritional equivalent of, stopping smoking. You know what I'm saying? That's the problem. We have to look at our food industry and see how and understand how they have been able to manipulate us to eating these, food that we see in our supermarkets. So what I tell patients really quickly is, when you shop a supermarket, it's very strategic, right? And I tell them to shop the perimeter of a supermarket. Why? Because that's where we keep, refrigeration. We keep things alive is with the refrigeration around the supermarket. Everything in the middle is on a shelf, right? So how do we keep things on a shelf? By preservatives, chemicals, additives, colorings, things like that, right? We don't know. And because of all the combination, we don't know how that's going to affect us, long term. But I always tell patients, I was like, if you need to shop for things in the middle, go for things that are 5 ingredients or less. And if you can't pronounce an ingredient, I wouldn't put that in your body. And then, Mother Nature, real food doesn't have a nutritional label. And, if you eat real food, it's perishable, So I tell people, if it didn't come out of the ground, if it didn't come off of a tree, and if it didn't come off of a vine like that, I probably would minimize it. So not only do you have inflammation, you have things like heme iron, you have things like TMSO, you have things like endotoxins. You have different components that come with animal protein, for example, that, destroys the body. I'm saying that promotes the oxidation, your body. What we found with plant food is that it does the opposite. And what it has that animal foods don't have, in proportion is vitamins, minerals, antioxidants, polyphenols, and fiber. Fiber only exists in plant food. It doesn't exist in animal food. And if you think about the animals, for us Americans, we eat cows, beef, chickens, things like that, pigs. What do they eat? They eat plants.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? So
therefore they're vegetarian. It's okay.
They're vegetarians, And if you look at the largest animals on Earth, giraffes, elephants, gorillas, what do they eat? Plants. You know what I'm saying? So how do they get so large? You know what I'm saying? Because we're so obsessed with protein. We're so obsessed with, calcium. We're so obsessed with all these different things that if you look at the animals that we actually eat, they're actually just a middleman. They get their nutrition from Mother Nature.
Well, what do you have to say about like vegans who, I'm not saying, I don't know if you're going all the way like hardcore, like let's be vegans or not when it comes to this, but it seems that there are a lot of vegans that they just kind of default to breads, carbs. They still don't eat much vegetables. And so after a few years, they're chronically malnutritioned. What do you think's the thoughts?
So with that, you have to look at the terminology. You have to understand a definition. So like plant-based is vegan, but not every vegan is plant-based. You see what I'm saying? So vegan is devoid of animal products, right?
And that's their biggest catch.
Yeah. And extreme vegan would be like they're not even wearing or use any products that are made from an animal, right? So you could eat a Twinkie. I don't know my international audiences know what a Twinkie is, but you and I know what a Twinkie is. But if you eat a Twinkie all day long, you can still categorize yourself as a vegan, right?
Yeah, it's squishy, it's fake bread, it's the most marshmallowy, just
so that's why
trash.
That's why I say like Whole Foods plant-based, right? So Whole Foods plant-based is basically like 95, 98% predominantly plants. And then you have vegetarians, which is a separate category. And vegetarians is a full spectrum, right? You have vegetarians who eat plants that eat eggs. You have vegetarians that eat, just cheese. Or you have pescatarians that eat fish. So you have to be able to be careful with how you use your terminology. And another thing I would say is that if you look at the blue zones, you research the body of work by Dan Buettner, who's a National Geographic explorer and writer. The blue zones are high concentrations of people that live over 100 in different pockets of the world. There's like 4 or 5 of them. If you look at the diet of the blue zones, they're not even vegan. They do eat animals, but they do it very, 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 very infrequent and very rarely compared to Western civilizations that it doesn't really, it's like a drop in the ocean. It doesn't really affect them. They eat meat, for celebratory events like weddings and anniversaries and holidays. You know what I'm saying? For us Americans, we eat it, 3 times a day, 365, 24/7. You know what I'm saying? So it's about, it's about predominantly what you're eating. So that's why I say, like, I just want you to eat more plants. I tell my patients, very simple, eat more plants.
What type of oils do you recommend? Butter? Or like what would you recommend people cook with?
So in terms of oils, it depends on if you can eat oils that are naturally found in plants, that's better. So nuts, seeds, avocados, things like that.
Like an avocado oil, flaxseed oil.
Yeah, so I would say, added oils, I would probably minimize as much as possible. But if you had to use a cooking oil, I would use depending on what kind of cooking you're doing. If you're doing high heat cooking, I would recommend like grapeseed or avocado oil. Okay. I would steer clear of any type of vegetable oil, soybean, canola. I would not use olive oil for cooking whatsoever.
Really?
Because you denature the oil when it reaches a certain smoking point. Every cooking oil has a certain smoking point. And so it'll burn essentially it'll burn at temperatures, quicker than others. I would just use avocado grapeseed oil if you had to use a cooking oil. But in our plant-based community, we advocate minimizing it, or just, eating the natural oils that come with food. So.
Yeah. So what do you use instead so you don't get stuck on a pot?
So there's just different cooking methods. So it depends. When you look at cooking, the research behind cooking methods, when you're doing wet cooking versus, dry cooking, wet cooking is healthier in terms of minimizing the AGEs, which is blanking here, which is basically.
What does wet mean? Like boiling or just having more?
So wet meaning like, boiling, steaming, parboiling, things like that. Dry cooking is like roasting, grilling, sauteing, frying, things like that.
Like wok cooking would be considered dry normally?
Yeah. Wok cooking, Chinese cooking is basically you're using a lot of oils and you're using a big wok to be able to push it back and forth and using a high surface area. You know what I'm saying? But you're not using a lot. You are using oils, but you're also using liquids as well. So, but the point of it is that you're minimizing AGEs, which is basically the oxidation components that produces basically quote unquote rust to our body. When you're cooking more dry, like for example, when you're grilling something and you see that blackness, that's cancer producing.
You mean the good part?
Yeah, the tasty part. Yeah, exactly. So there are cooking methods where you can, just brown to a certain point, but if you do too much of it, you're promoting more AGEs, thus producing more, oxidative components in your body.
So I would probably say you really lost a lot of people when you said we have to boil and steam most of our vegetables, because automatically they're like, this is going to be boring. Have you had steamed broccoli before? You're crazy. But I think once you cook it, for instance, like I cook a lot of, like I call it Asian Cajun because I'm from South Louisiana, so we've got to blacken things. But if you were to boil or steam a bunch of eggplant and broccoli and things like that, you can always throw it back into a wok or something and put your seasoning and just sort of spin it around, maybe put some soy sauce or whatever else you want to put into it. And then boom, now you still have a ton of flavor, but you cooked it in a steamed fashion.
Yeah, when people who do not put themselves into a kitchen, I always tell people, get yourself into a kitchen. That's how you take back your health. Because when you outsource, I like to use the word outsource. When you outsource your food to like a restaurant or a takeout or a delivery, you don't know how they're preparing your food.
It is built for taste.
Yeah, and it's built for a business. They're there to make money, right? How do they make money? By reducing costs, by buying the cheapest ingredients and cheapest ways to prepare your food in order to make a profit, right? How are they going to stay afloat? So that doesn't translate to the healthiest ingredients that's going into they're not there to look after your health. They're there to make a business. So I tell people, what's going into your food when you're in your own kitchen. So I don't care if you're an amateur cook or whatever. I'm not asking you to be, Michelin star chef. I just need you to get back into the kitchen and prepare your own food. That's how you take back your health.
Yep. Okay, switching gears, I want to make sure we stay within our time frame here. I always like to ask about personal stuff. So when we're talking about like a spouse or a significant other, things like that, a lot of people do all these things and they get divorced and it's always sad. And is there any tips that you have learned through life so far that helps you to have a good, strong relationship with other people?
I definitely say the biggest – it's funny you asked that because I went to a physician wellness conference earlier this year, and they said that financially what would help you the most is date night. And what that means is that, spending the time to reinforce, your relationship, not just with your spouse, but with your family, with your friends. One of the longest studies that we have that came out of Harvard, it was like a 70-year study. And the question they were asking was, what are the main factors that, promote joy and happiness and things like that? What they found was relationships. If you could spend the time, especially in a pandemic where we are going more indoors, spend the time to reach out to someone you normally wouldn't reach out to. Spend more than just the 5 minutes of pleasantries. Talk deeper. Ask uncomfortable questions. Spend the time. Do something, with your significant other. Try to get to learn something more about them. The more we can, learn about each other and thereby learning more about ourselves, the better, the deeper relationship we have, and we're social beings. So we will have more of an enriching life. Throughout my travels, just in life, I just find that experiences mean the most to me. Making memories, having experience mean the most to me. So to me, it's like I invest, more time and energy with people. You know what I'm saying? So that's what I do. Yeah. If I have any tips, it's really just there's no right or wrong to it. Just spend more time with them, practice learning. If you mess up saying something, just, rephrase your words, go back at it, and have a humbling attitude, and always come from a place of gratitude. Life is short. I know that's a cliche, but I think what the pandemic has taught us is that life is also fragile. For those of us that have lost, a loved one to COVID, we realize that it's another reminder that life is very fragile. So don't wait, like spend the time to get to reinforce your relationships.
And in a timely manner. It's I don't know about you, but I have a lot of black friends, and with the Black Lives Matter movement and everything, it was challenging to say, okay, let's have this conversation if they're willing to have it, because it's going to be an uncomfortable conversation probably for both people.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you have to tread lightly sometimes, because you might make assumptions, they might make assumptions, and feelings can be hurt, and you don't want to damage a relationship, but at the same time, you're like, hey, these are important conversations that you could have, and there's no better time than now.
Yeah.
When it's kind of all in your face.
Yeah.
For the entire year. So I mean, I don't know how to encourage that if people want to have that conversation or not, but I think it's worth having.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think in America, I don't know how it is in Germany with the Black Lives Matters movement, but in America, it's very, very, very heated and very, we still haven't really got a hold of it. And for those that are not black or brown, it's just for America, it's something that's been in our history and in our, American history and culture for like 400 years. And the reason why we just haven't really addressed it appropriately. And this affects our economy. This affects our healthcare. I've written an article about how it influences healthcare disparities, affects our economy, and it affects everything from every type of level. So I would say the best thing you can do is just educate yourself, to inform yourself. Ultimately, if you're not black, without judgment, I would say it's better to listen, and have an open mind and be patient and just let people just kind of voice out whatever they need to voice out. You know what I'm saying? Because I think listening is the best way to kind of open yourself for change, so.
And just by listening doesn't mean you actually agree with what they're saying.
Right.
But to know and then making those decisions, I think it's two different things, but it goes a long way to like understand what the other person is trying to say. Okay, so last fun part. You mentioned a lot of names in the show already, mostly researchers, but any books or other podcasts that we should look at, especially as a doctor audience, that we should probably read or look at so that we can actually pass on to our patients?
Oh yeah, definitely. So the number one nutrition source that I go to is by Dr. Michael Greger, and he founded the nonprofit called nutritionfacts.org. And he's written the book How Not to Die, his second book How Not to Diet, and he's literally the number one go-to person in terms of like unbiased information, because what he does, he's dedicated his career by delving in and diving deep into the latest nutrition and lifestyle and food type of evidence-based research. And what he does is that he will take all that research and then distill it into bite-sized videos for everyone to look at, and read and consume, free, no commercial, bias, no sponsorships on his work. And all the monies that he gets from his books, his speaking engagements, all goes back to charity. And then goes back to continue the foundation and continue his work. And he's really good. He's very engaging. He's very funny. I, recommend if you need nutritional help, go to nutritionfacts.org. And in terms of, the other stuff, in terms of building up emotional resilience, things like that, I've always been a big fan of Tony Robbins. Tony Robbins is, internationally known. He has his own podcast. He's helped a lot of people, and he's been doing his coaching style for like 4 decades now. And he's like, he's
like your mom.
Yeah. So that's what I would do. And, if you want to learn more about me, you can go to chefdoczu.com. I have links to, all my resources, book, podcast, things like that. And you can.
ZHU is Jew.
Yeah. So chefdoczu.com. And I'm sure you'll provide those links. So.
Absolutely. You'll have a whole show notes page with transcript even.
Yeah. Awesome.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for being on our program.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And it was a privilege. And thank you to you as well.
Another great interview has ended. While you're on your phone, click that review button. Write up a nice review for me. 5 stars if you could. As everyone says in the industry, it'll help other people to find us when we have enough rankings. Not to mention, I'll mention you and your review on an upcoming episode. If you follow me at all on Instagram, you only get one link. So I use a Linktree, And so it's a doctorsperspective.net/links with an S. And that's going to give you everything you need to know. The top episodes of 2017 and 2018, the podiatry series, dentist, acupuncture series, holiday 2017, financial series, how to write a review, how to support the show like buying a cup of coffee, getting swag like t-shirts, the Today's Choices Tomorrow's Health book, that's the blueprints for better health, exercise, picking food correctly, and financial. And then, of course, bundle packs, which can get you the No Needle Acupuncture book for 40 common conditions, including the electric acupuncture pin at a great deal. The resources page has some of the products that I like. It's affiliate style, so if you buy something from them, I get a piece of that. Just like on the show notes pages, if you buy a book from clicking that link, I get a small piece of that as well. So I really appreciate that. Things like Screencast-O-Matic, Pure VPN, Missing Letter, JLab speakers, Prolone, Edge, or Hawk grips. Once again, if you do need any coaching on how to improve some of your blood work, drop weight, and the Prolone diet, fast mimicking diet, 5-day plan, let me know. As well as if you just need some coaching, whether it's health, whether it's marketing, whether you need some practice growth, etc. Reach out. Facebook, Justin Trosclair, MCC. Of course, at a doctorsperspective.net on the top right, you got all the social media icons that you can imagine. Click your favorite and reach out. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please tell a friend, pass it along. You can go to .net/listen. It's just that easy. It'll open up right in your app. And don't forget, I appreciate you. Listen, critically think, and integrate. See you on the mini-sodes on Thursdays and Saturdays. Hope you're enjoying those. I'm definitely having fun summarizing these podcasts in less than 10 minutes for you. You get the nuggets without having to waste your time. Have a great week.
A doctor's perspective. Learn stories of success. Avoid struggles they've met. Doctors of all kinds come together to help you shine. So sit down